Hello everyone, welcome to the book station. I am Sanjana and here's me wishing you a very late but a very happy new year. The last time you probably saw me was 4 months ago last year, and since then, honestly, I didn't read a lot, but I did read some quite, you know, amazing books. So I thought, why not come here and share with all of you some of the best books that I read in the year 2020 so you can read them this year or in the future anytime you feel like. And though 2020 has been very tough, honestly, for almost all of us, there has been a silver lining to this very dark cloud. That is, we did find a lot of time, if not a lot, at least a little extra time. And with the time that I found, I did end up reading quite some books. And though I did not reach my Goodreads challenge last year, I did read a lot of books. And I think I read around 30 out of the 50 books that I wanted to read. And most of them have been amazing and they have impacted me and changed the way that I look at the world. So I thought it would help you too if I shared some of the best books and why they are best in my opinion. So without further ado, I'm going to start listing them and describing them in no particular order. And if you do like this video, I would appreciate it if you subscribed and even went and watched my previous videos. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you did not, please give it a thumbs down and let me know in the comment section what you thought about it. The first book that I want to talk about is Punachi by Perumal Murugan. I think I've mentioned about this book in my previous video as well because this is a phenomenal book. Perumal Murugan is a South Indian, a Tamil writer in fact, and he first wrote a book called One Part Woman, which became so controversial that he gave up writing, and he was criticized for writing about casteism and how humans discriminate based on several grounds, and he was targeted and he even received death threats. So very recently, my alma mater conducted a workshop to interact with the author himself. And when asked why he wrote about a goat, why he chose to write about a goat, a small goat, he told that humans could be a problem if written about, and so could several animals like pigs and cows. But a goat is harmless, and that's why he chose to write about a goat. And this novel, Punachi, is a social commentary on how human beings showcase and put themselves forward to be very caring and humane in nature. So the story is about Punachi, a small goat who is adopted by an old couple, and her growth into adulthood and her having her own kids. But through this story, we see how human beings are dominated by greed. And in the name of caring and nurturing, we actually do the opposite. The irony is that while we are supposed to nourish these innocent animals, we strip them of all the love and care and agency that these animals, as living beings, are entitled to. And why Punachi is on top of my list, if I had to put it in 2020, is because each reader might connect with it in a very different way. And that is why, and it's very subjective. And that is why I think that everyone must read Punachi. The next book that comes to my mind is an audiobook called Anne of Green Gables, which is also based on the novel by the same title. And it is already made into a Canadian series called Anne with an E, which is available on Netflix. And this book is so entertaining, so hilarious. It follows the life of Anne Shirley Cuthbert, who is adopted by Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert, who initially want to adopt a 11-year-old boy who can help them out with farm work. But the orphanage that was supposed to send a boy ends up sending Anne, whom no one else adopts. So no one wants to adopt Anne because of her quirky nature. And Anne is an amazing personality. She's so imaginative because all her life she has been an orphan and she spent a lot of time with herself. And her escape is imagination. And she is so extremely dramatic. And the entire book follows Anne and her experiences, her mistakes, and how she reacts to it. And it's extremely entertaining. And if you are looking for some drama, for a young adult drama, then I think this novel is it. But if you watch the series, you will understand that they have taken it to the next level and made it relevant to the world that we live in. And they've addressed a lot of social issues as well. And that is why I think, and with an E, the audiobook or the novel, you can read it and it's best watched with the series as well. And that's another series recommendation, and with an E on Netflix. The next best book has to be Feminism is for Everybody by Bell Hooks. So, this book was published in the year 2000, and it's a basic take on feminism. So, anyone out there who is wondering what feminism is about, and if you're planning to learn more about it and become more active feminists, this book is a must read because it talks about how feminism can uplift all genders, because feminism is not anti-male. It's not about being equal to each other only. It's about equality among all, irrespective of gender and other cultural backgrounds. And in Feminism is for Everybody, Bell Hooks talks about how your social background, how your community, how your caste, or of how your nationality affects your gender and how you perceive the world, and why feminism is very important, not just in one particular aspect, but it's very important in all areas of life, whether it's at home or at workplace or at school or any other social setup. Feminism is important because it addresses how patriarchy subjugates not just one gender but all genders altogether. And the language is so simple in this book, and it is because the language is so simple that makes this book so easy to read, because feminism as a concept can get complex at several levels, but bell hooks puts it in such plain words that even a layman who isn't even planning to graduate with a degree with feminism in feminism or any other study can read this and understand what basic equal rights refers to. The next book that I read, I think I remember, is yes, The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. And though many of you might not agree with the opinions that I have about this book is so unique because of the storyline and the way it's written and the characterization as well. So, the Graveyard Book follows the life of Nobody Owens. So, who's Nobody Owens? He is an infant whose parents and family is killed by a person called Jack. So, when his family is killed, he unknowingly crawls across the road and reaches this graveyard, which is in turn turned into a conservatory, where he is adopted by the ghosts of the graveyard, and he grows up in the graveyard learning the life and ways of ghosts and other supernatural beings. So this is his story from being an infant to, I think, 13, 12-year old, and it's a young adult fiction and fits anyone in that category. But um, the characterization and the storyline is so entertaining and unique that even an adult would enjoy it. And the story changes completely when nobody realizes that there's a world out there that he hasn't explored, and he can't really hide inside this conservatory because the person Jack, who killed his parents, is looking out for nobody as well. So once he actually escapes and goes on an adventure outside the graveyard but comes back, and that's when he realizes he craves to to explore the world out there. And within this storyline, you see a lot of adventure within the supernatural world, and several characters are dear, and you get to connect with them a lot. And that is why this book was an escape, especially for me during the lockdown, and I think is an entertaining read. The next book is Interpreter of Maladies by Jhumpa Lahiri. Jhumpa Lahiri is a famous author, and I think her most famous book has to be The Namesake and The Lowland as well, or Lowland. I've read The Namesake for now successfully, and but I haven't read Lowland. But The Interpreter of Maladies is a collection of short stories, and it's also best for anyone who's starting off reading. It's a collection of stories about diaspora, about how displacement from your country of birth to a new country can affect your identity, and definitely does. So it has several stories ranging of people of different ages. You have one story of an elderly couple um, where they've just moved abroad from India, and the husband goes out and works as a professor while the wife stays at home and tries to make a living. But it becomes very difficult because of the cultural disconnect. She has spent all her life in India, but all of a sudden she is introduced to this new world where everything is just opposite to what she has experienced till now. Women drive, they have their own life. She can't even speak the same language as people around her very fluently. And you have another story of a girl where she witnesses an elderly person, a man comes to her house every evening to drink tea and talk with her parents. But when she calls him an Indian, her parents are very clearly point out that he's not an Indian, he is a Pakistani. But she observes how their eating habits, the way of talking, and all their cultural talks about their culture is all the same. But the only difference is that they are separated by a certain border. And through these stories you get to experience a lot of human emotions, and that is why I think this collection of short story is as impactful as a novel itself. And I think everyone should read it because you will definitely find at least one story that you can personally connect with. The next book that I would love to share about or talk about is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. This is the second time I read this book. I read it, I think, 12 years ago, and I'm sure I did not understand the depth and the real meaning and the real issue that this book was trying to convey. It talks about racism in America, and this time that I read it, I fell in love, head over heels in love with this book. And this is told from the perspective of Scout Finch, who is just a very young girl who is, I think, 5 years old. And it's her introduction to the idea of racism around her. So the story takes part in the southern part of America, where Scout and her elder brother, Jem, they grow up and they have a very fun childhood. But all of a sudden, people around them, that is, the white people around them, start behaving and treating them in a very bad way. Their father, who is a widower, his name is Atticus, he takes up a case of a black man who is accused of molesting a white woman. And that becomes the reason why people around Scout and Jem Finch, white people who were till then sweet to them, start teasing them, disrespecting them, and even harming them in several ways. Just because their father took up a case to defend this black man. And through the eyes of Scout Finch, who is just a young girl who has no idea about racism and the difference in the color of skin, we see how frustrated she is because of the way she's treated, and also because of how people discriminate between color, people of different color. And that is why this book is so phenomenal, I would say, and still so relevant because in several ways things haven't changed. People still are racist in several parts of the world, and through the eyes of these two young kids, we see how this idea of racism is so absurd and how it can reduce the value that we human beings have. Because people whom Jem and Scout liked, until then they start hating, and they even start disrespecting because of the way they treat black people. So I think this is a must read to anyone, even if you are not interested in reading altogether. And then around, I think around Halloween, October, I started reading very dark books, and one of them is The Amazing, The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. If you haven't heard of this book, then please continue watching, and you have to read this book at least once in your life. This is one book that is so Amazing. I think I've said all the books up till now are amazing because this is a video about best books. But The Picture of Dorian Gray is a very creepy book, and it's amazing, but in a very creepy way. Because this is the story about Dorian Gray and his portrait. So, when his friend, I don't remember the artist's name right now, but when the portrait of Dorian Gray is painted, Dorian Gray becomes so jealous and wishes that he never ages, and his portrait does. And what happens is it becomes a reality. So Dorian Gray stays the same that he was on the day that his portrait was painted, but his portrait starts aging and he witnesses how cruel he is as a person as his portrait ages right before him. And through the story of Dorian Gray, we get to know how greedy human beings are and how much we value this external beauty and external appearance more than human qualities. Because you see that though Dorian Gray remains very pure on the outside, very beautiful and charming to look at, his actual deeds and his real life is quite opposite, and it's a very ironical story, and it's just a very short read, so it keeps you on your toes every time you're reading it. So anyone out there who is in the mood to read a creepy, entertaining mystery thriller story, this is the book for you. And then after that, I read another creepy story, that is The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The author's name I don't remember. Anyway, but do not look up about this book, because I fortunately looked up about the book after I read it, and all the websites reveal a lot more than necessary. And that is why I ask you not to Google this about this book at all. Just get into it. It's an amazing read. It's a very short read. You can finish it within a few hours. It's the story about the relationship between this popular and well-known, respected surgeon, Dr. Jekyll, and his relationship with this notorious evil person called Mr. Hyde. So Hyde is hated by everyone in the town, but for some reason, Mr. Utterson, who is a lawyer and a friend of Dr. Jekyll, realizes that Dr. Jekyll somehow favors Mr. Hyde. And when he goes on this secret mission of discovering what is the relationship between these two people, he is his his mind, just like ours, is blown away because of what he discovers. And I do not want to talk much, lest I reveal a lot, but through the story we understand how sometimes we want to do good but we end up doing the worst. And this story is about a deal with the devil where uh, Dr. Jekyll wants to do something good, but he ends up doing the worst possible thing he can as a surgeon, and as a human being. And this is a very creepy and chilling story. And anyone again who is in the mood to read something very creepy should definitely take this up. The next is actually a short story called The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins. And this is a semi autobiographical short story, and it talks about madness in women. And why is it semi autobiographical? Because this is based on the life or the state that Charlotte Perkins herself was after the birth of a child. So she undergoes a condition called postpartum depression, which affects most women, a majority of women after the birth of their child. And during the times of Charlotte Perkins, women who underwent such a disorder or a mental health issue were asked to take up a certain treatment by a doctor called Silas Mitchell, and the treatment was called Rest Cure. And what this treatment involved was women being locked up indoors without letting them come in contact with people outside or engage in any kind of stimulating or imaginative work. And in this story, you see the author, the narrator of the short story, is also going through a condition of this sort, and she is asked by her husband, and her who is also her doctor, who is confined to this space within four walls, and the wall is made up of a yellow wallpaper. And it is her description of how life within these four walls is, because she is cut off from people. She is not allowed to read or write anything. She's not allowed to go out and walk. And this is her description of slowly turning mad. And this is such an ironic story and reality, because while you're asking someone to become more, you're stripping them of all the agency, of all the happiness, of all the freedom that one can have. And imagining that women really had to go through this at one point in time sends chills down my spine. And that is why I think Charlotte Perkins wrote this story, because she, after writing this story, she even sent it to Silas Mitchell, who is, renowned for this treatment of rest cure, which was supposed to cure people, but it did the opposite by sending people or making women go mad altogether. And again, this is a slightly creepy story, but I think it's a must read to understand the workings of a troubled mind and what happens if we do not reach out to people when they are actually in need of someone to talk to. The next two titles and the last two is are both by the author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. The first one is a short story called Zikora, which is about this woman called Zikora, who is a lawyer, and her short story and her flashback of her life. So we see that the story starts off when Zikora is in the hospital giving birth to her first child, and she's accompanied by her mother. And the story is her developing emotions and her flashbacks to her life in Nigeria. And we see what initially is the story of a woman just giving birth to a baby slowly turns into flashbacks about love, about parenthood, friendship, motherhood. Because Zikora's mother is very harsh on her and she does not like it. So she in turn does not harbor love and care towards her mother. But when she thinks back about the difficult life that Zikora's mother has had, because her father marries another woman because she does not have any brothers. Her mother fails to give him the son that her father wants. And through these flashbacks, Zikora realizes the difficulties that her mother has gone through, yet how strong and how she has, been successful in preserving the self-respect and the dignity that she has earned all of her life. The next title is also by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. The novel is Purple Hibiscus, which is about this young girl called Kambili, who is the protagonist, and it's her coming of age story, we could say. And Kambili is in Nigeria, and she lives her life. Her family, in fact, her brother, I think his name is Jaja, and her mother and her father all live their life according to the schedule, which is decided by their patriarchal father. And it is narrated from her perspective, her everyday life, of how they, no matter what happens, stick to this schedule, which is designed by her father. And when the opposite happens, that is, if they break the schedule, what is the critical consequence? And Jaja and Kambili are very sweet kids, but they are always subjugated by their angry and, I would say, religious extremist father. And things change altogether when there is a coup in Nigeria, and all of a sudden, Jaja and Kambili, they're sent to live with their young aunt, who is the sister of their father, and their aunt is a professor at a university, and there they come to understand what real life is, what real freedom tastes like, because they are not governed by any schedule. They are not asked to stick to certain rules no matter how harsh they are. They're given the freedom that every 14-16-year-old person should get. And through this transformation, Kamili herself transforms from a naive girl who does not understand the abuse that her family is going through at the hands of her father to a person who becomes a young woman who stands up for her mother and also becomes a strong woman who stands by her brother as well. So, this is a story of a young girl discovering her own voice and understanding um, that the father that she loves so dearly is not a dear one, actually, and the fact that her innocent mother has been the pillar of their house and how she has been going through a lot of abuse yet has ensured that her kids have always remained safe. That is why I think Purple Hibiscus is so dear, because it makes you understand how several people around you go through a lot of um, struggles at times to keep you safe. And that is why I think Purple Hibiscus is a must read, and it's a dear book as well to me. So those were the 10, 11, I don't know how many books, but those were the best books of 2020 that I read. And it has been a long video. And if you have survived till here, I'm grateful to you. Thank you so much. I had a lot of fun filming this video and I feel tired altogether. But if you did like this video, then please do give it a thumbs up. It will mean a lot. And I shall see you next time. Bye bye.